political regime change is among the most difficult and dangerous transformations in the life of a nation-state. Sometimes it occurs through elections and constitutional transition. Sometimes it emerges through military intervention, revolution, civil war, foreign pressure, or collapse of institutions. In the modern era, successful regime change requires not merely public anger, but a convergence of political weakness, elite fragmentation, economic breakdown, international circumstances, organizational leadership, and ideological legitimacy. The experiences of Pakistan, Iran, and China illustrate three entirely different models of political resilience and vulnerability. In the case of Pakistan, regime changes have historically been relatively frequent and comparatively achievable. In Iran during 2026, despite widespread protests and severe unrest, regime change efforts remained unsuccessful because the state structure retained ideological cohesion and coercive capacity. In China, meanwhile, regime change appears almost unimaginable in current decades because of the extraordinary fusion of economic power, technological surveillance, nationalist legitimacy, institutional discipline, and centralized state authority. Pakistan's political history since independence in 1947 demonstrates repeated cycles of civilian instability, military intervention, constitutional disruption, and political reconstruction. The first major successful regime change occurred in 1958, when President Iskandar Mirza abrogated the constitution and imposed martial law, only to be displaced shortly afterward by General Ayub Khan. The success of that transition depended largely upon institutional weakness, absence of democratic consolidation, bureaucratic dominance inherited from colonial structures, and political fragmentation among civilian elites. Another decisive regime change occurred in 1969 when Ayub Khan transferred power to General Yahya Khan amid rising public protests, economic grievances, and political polarization between East and West Pakistan. The crisis deepened and eventually culminated in the dismemberment of Pakistan in 1971 and the emergence of Bangladesh. The collapse of military legitimacy created conditions for Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's civilian rule. In 1977, another successful regime change emerged through General Zia-ul Haq's military coup against Bhutto. Several elements made the coup successful. First, the Pakistan National Alliance had already mobilized massive street agitation against alleged electoral rigging. Second, political negotiations had broken down. Third, the military institution remained highly cohesive and disciplined. Fourth, Cold War geopolitics soon strengthened Zia's government after the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan in 1979. The 1999 military takeover by General Pervez Musharraf against Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif again reflected familiar Pakistani patterns. Institutional conflict between civilian authority and military leadership reached a breaking point after the Kargil conflict of 1999. The military establishment retained internal unity, while civilian political institutions lacked sufficient strength to resist intervention. Several broader factors explain why regime changes historically succeeded in Pakistan. First is the central political role of the military establishment. Since independence, the armed forces evolved not merely as a defense institution but also as an administrative, strategic, and political actor. This created a parallel power structure capable of intervening whenever civilian systems weakened. Second is institutional fragility. Pakistan's political parties often revolved around personalities rather than strong democratic structures. Frequent dissolutions of assemblies, constitutional crises, corruption allegations, and governance failures weakened democratic continuity. Third is economic instability. Periodic inflation, debt crises, unemployment, and dependency on foreign assistance created public dissatisfaction that frequently delegitimized governments. Fourth is elite fragmentation. Political consensus among civilian elites rarely remained durable for long periods. Rival factions often sought support from non-electoral power centers against one another. Fifth is geopolitical importance. During the Cold War, the Afghan Jihad, and the post 9/11 period, international powers often prioritized strategic stability over democratic continuity in Pakistan. External actors therefore frequently accommodated regime transitions rather than resisting them. Yet Pakistan also demonstrates an important modern evolution. Since the restoration of democracy in 2008, constitutional continuity has become comparatively stronger. Civilian governments completed parliamentary terms in 2013, 2018, and 2024 despite severe tensions. This indicates gradual institutional maturation, even though political polarization remains intense. Iran in 2026 presents a sharply different picture. The Islamic Republic faced perhaps its gravest internal crisis since the 1979 revolution. Economic hardship, sanctions, inflation, youth unemployment, currency collapse, internet restrictions, and public frustration generated widespread demonstrations across many provinces. Reports during early 2026 described nationwide protests and severe state crackdowns. Many external observers speculated that the Iranian regime might collapse under combined domestic unrest and international pressure. Some analysts even openly discussed regime change. Yet these efforts remained unsuccessful for several fundamental reasons. The first reason was ideological state structure. Unlike many authoritarian governments, the Iranian system is not merely bureaucratic or military. It is deeply ideological, rooted in the doctrine established after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Institutions such as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, Basij militias, clerical networks, and revolutionary courts remain interconnected through ideological loyalty. Second, the Iranian security apparatus retained cohesion. Although protests were extensive, the core coercive institutions did not fracture. Historical experience shows that revolutions usually succeed only when sections of the security establishment defect or refuse repression. In Iran during 2026, this fragmentation did not occur. Reports indicated severe crackdowns, executions, arrests, and internet shutdowns designed to prevent organizational coordination among protesters. Third, the opposition lacked unified leadership. Iranian dissidents included liberals, monarchists, secular republicans, ethnic activists, reformists, and diaspora organizations. However, no single movement possessed universally accepted leadership or organizational command capable of replacing the state structure. Fourth, nationalism played a powerful role. External military pressure and foreign rhetoric regarding regime change often strengthened internal cohesion rather than weakening it. Even critics of the Iranian government frequently opposed foreign intervention. Analysts observed that wartime conditions encouraged elite solidarity. Fifth, the Iranian state demonstrated extraordinary tolerance for economic pain and international isolation. Decades of sanctions had already conditioned state institutions toward survival under pressure. Research studies indicate that long-term confrontation produced deep economic damage, yet did not destroy regime continuity. Thus, despite enormous unrest in 2026, the Iranian regime survived because state institutions retained ideological commitment, coercive unity, centralized command, and nationalist legitimacy among important segments of society. China represents an even more extraordinary case. In present decades, regime change in the People's Republic of China appears almost unthinkable and unaffordable both domestically and internationally. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, established in 1921 and victorious in 1949 under Mao Zedong, has evolved into perhaps the most sophisticated authoritarian governing structure in modern history. Unlike fragile authoritarian systems dependent solely upon coercion, China combines economic performance, technological control, nationalism, bureaucratic efficiency, and global integration. One major reason regime change appears impossible is economic centrality. China is the world's second-largest economy and deeply integrated into global manufacturing, finance, trade, supply chains, and technology systems. Sudden political collapse in China would generate catastrophic worldwide economic consequences. The global economy itself therefore acts as a stabilizing factor. Second is technological surveillance capacity. China has developed one of the world's most advanced systems of digital governance, facial recognition, artificial intelligence monitoring, internet censorship, and social management. Potential dissent can often be identified and contained before becoming nationally organized. Third is the institutional discipline within the Communist Party. Unlike many states suffering elite fragmentation, the CCP maintains strict hierarchical control. Internal disagreements certainly exist, but they are generally managed within party structures rather than erupting into open factional warfare. Fourth is nationalism. China's rapid rise since the economic reforms initiated by Deng Xiaoping after 1978 created enormous national pride. Many Chinese citizens associate political stability with economic progress and restoration of historical dignity after what Chinese historiography calls the century of humiliation. Fifth is state capacity. The Chinese state possesses immense administrative reach, infrastructural power, financial resources, and long-term planning capability. This creates resilience against economic shocks and social unrest. Sixth is international caution. Foreign powers understand that destabilization of China could produce uncontrollable global consequences including economic collapse, military confrontation, refugee crises, nuclear instability, and disruption of world trade routes. Consequently, even strategic rivals generally pursue competition rather than direct regime change policies. The contrast among Pakistan, Iran, and China therefore reveals an important political reality. Regime change succeeds not merely because populations become dissatisfied. It succeeds only when several structural conditions converge simultaneously: weakening legitimacy, elite fragmentation, economic collapse, organizational opposition, and security defections. Pakistan historically experienced relatively successful regime transitions because institutions remained divided and military intervention became normalized. Iran in 2026 resisted regime change pressures because ideological institutions and coercive systems remained unified despite public unrest. China today stands in an even stronger position where economic centrality, technological governance, nationalist legitimacy, and institutional cohesion make regime change extraordinarily improbable. Modern political history therefore demonstrates a profound lesson. States do not survive merely through force, nor collapse merely through protests. The durability of regimes ultimately depends upon institutional cohesion, legitimacy, adaptability, economic capacity, and the ability to maintain the loyalty of both elites and ordinary citizens.